Hey, what's up guys, Adam here, and this is the very first video for 2018 on this channel. So I'd like to wish you guys a very happy new year. I know it's been late coming, but I hope the new year has gone really well for you so far. So as you can tell from the title below, I've finally made the switch now to 4K on this channel, but there's a bit more of a backstory behind it as to why I'm using the camera I am now and what happened to the previous camera that I was using beforehand before I made the switch. So the initial camera that I wanted to actually get my hands on, and I did get my hands on, was the Panasonic Lumix G7. As you know, that camera is kind of wearing the crown for the most budget-friendly 4K camera on the market. It's been wearing that crown now for about 2 years, and even now the price has dropped down significantly to about £500. So from that alone, I watched quite a few reviews on the camera, read quite a few articles, and overall I was thinking this seems like a very good camera to get my foot in the door into the whole world of 4K. So when the camera did arrive, I was like, okay, this looks good so far. Let's go ahead and take a look to see how this camera performs, since it's been really well praised on, YouTube, on various different forums. This is, as I mentioned before, this is crowned as one of the best budget 4K cameras on the market, and a lot of people have a lot of positive things to say about this particular camera. So this camera is not an APS-C, as you may know. It's a micro four thirds sensor. And from someone who's switching from a APS-C crop sensor to micro four thirds, I did have that in mind to see what would the image quality be like with a smaller sensor. And one of the things that I noticed right off the bat was the amount, or the limited amount of light that sensor can actually pick up in its natural form. And I say natural form is because I know you can get speed boosts which allow you to increase the focal length and allow you to get an extra type of light onto the back of the sensor. But in its naked form, as a sensor on its own, it was not getting in that much light, and that resulted in a really grainy image. It was almost like I was shooting off a 4K camera on a smartphone. It just didn't really have the quality that I was expecting, and that was kind of really a real downfall for me, because with that being said, and it being a micro four thirds sensor, I tried to then adapt some of my Nikon glass using a adapter that can go to Nikon AI or Nikon F to micro four thirds. And because of the crop factor of the micro four thirds sensor, a 50mm lens, for example, was coming at like 100mm, and the 28mm Pango lens that I'm using now and was trying to experiment with on that camera was so far cropped in that it was almost like a 50, or even in some cases a 70mm lens. And for the type of shooting style that I do, that was zoomed in way too far, and doing videos like this were incredibly difficult when I was trying to test out the camera, because I'd have to have the camera set miles away, and I'd have to be sitting all the way back just to actually get myself in frame, and that was just a real downfall for me. But that wasn't the only grab for me. That would be something I could live to. I could actually learn to get used to shooting with a micro four thirds camera, and as I said before, I can get a speed booster to get a greater stop of light onto the back of the sensor. But then there's another gripe that I came across with the camera, and that was the fact that you're not able to do live feed or use live view onto an external monitor from that camera. The minute you try to do any sort of recording whilst you have it hooked up to an external monitor, that monitor can show a black screen. It'll just say in live view mode now, and it'll just go to a black screen, and then you have to continue use the live feed on the back of the articulating screen onto the camera, which is kind of ridiculous, because I've had a lot of cameras since I've been on YouTube. I've had camcorders. The very first camera I started off with, in fact, was a Sanyo. I think it was like a Sanyo camcorder. It was a HD camcorder. It was very noisy, but it came in at around £70, and it was great to get started on YouTube. And even that camera allowed me to get, a live feed and record externally. Well, not externally to a monitor, but have HDMI pass through, so I could actually, view myself in frame on that monitor, rather than having to rely on the built-in flip-out LCD screen. All of the Nikon cameras, so the Nikon D3100, the D3200, I've been using since Noah built the Ark, as well as my Canon 1300D. All of those cameras that I have allow you to do live view to an external monitor and record, but the Panasonic Lumix G7 does not allow that. You can't do any sort of HDMI pass through onto a monitor and then record from there. They do have an alternative. It allows you to download their app and record over Wi-Fi to a tablet or a smartphone, but the quality on the playback, when you look at it, it's so grainy you can't even tell whether you're in focus or out of focus. That was not a really good alternative for me. I like to record through HDMI to an external monitor. I do that for YouTube work, I do that for the work outside of YouTube. Trying to pull focus on a really small display like the Lumix G7 is quite difficult, and that screen is so sharp, it does suffer with anti-aliasing a bit, so it's hard to tell whether you're in focus or out of focus or what is in focus. So therefore, trying to rely on that screen to actually do all of your video work, especially if you're going to be really trying to get that really tack sharp focus, it's just not a really easy deal, to be honest. So with that immense micro four thirds crop and the lack of option to be able to record to an external monitor, that for me, for this camera, unfortunately was a deal breaker, and therefore I had to sell it back and try and look elsewhere for another camera. So you're asking, okay, what camera did I get them to actually start shooting in 4K? And again, as I said before, I never had any intentions of actually getting a camera like this. I wanted to actually get the G7. It was a very inexpensive option to actually get started into 4K. But with as I said before, with all those issues, I had to move across, and that's why I now have my hands on the Sony a6300. Now, image quality comparison to the G7, it's not comparable. It's literally day and night. That difference to me between the micro four thirds and the APS-C sensor, and the fact that just overall Sony has a reputation for having really good image quality, especially in low light conditions. I mean, trying to compare the image quality, like I said before, it's night and day. The Sony a6300 just outshines when it comes to video quality, and that is why that is the camera I'm using now, and I don't regret it. I mean, I've had to invest in a lot more to actually get this camera, but it's definitely worth it in the long run. Now, of course, some of the drawbacks of the Sony is that it doesn't have the same sort of DSLR feel that I'm used to, like the G7 kind of had. And of course, if you're coming from a Nikon or a Canon, you're used to that DSLR-like format. So I'm having to get used to that, but it's not too much of an issue for me because I have the camera rigged up in a camera cage right now. If you want to actually see how I have this whole video set up, I'm going to do a video shortly after this one to show you how I have the camera set up and all of the various accessories that I have along with the camera. But that again, I can get used to the fact of having to adapt to a different shape or style of camera. Again, they do say that there are some overheating issues with the Sony a6300 and for a certain reason the a6500, but I have found a work around that, or a way around that to an extent. For that, I'm not recording to the internal battery, but I'm going to go ahead and do a more detailed video based on that to explain how I actually worked around that workaround and how I've actually got the camera set up now for when I do my video work. So the Sony used an APS-C sensor as opposed to the micro four thirds sensor, so adapting all of my glass is no issue. I don't see any real difference between how it was on my Nikon and how it is now on the Sony a6300. I'm actually using a speed booster as well. I'll actually leave the link to that speed boost in the description down below, and of course I'll speak more of it when I do my video based on how the rig is set up, but I'll leave a link to the description. I believe it's called the Zongai speed boost. It's got a very strange name, but it's a lens from China. So it's a speed boost from China that allows you to get an extra type of light, and it also allows you to get an increased focal length, so it actually takes it down to 0.77 crop factor, I think it is. And also, so that pretty much allows an APS-C sensor to perform more like a full frame sort of sensor. Not quite full frame, but on the approach to full frame. So that is a really good advantage as well. So far so good. I'm really enjoying using this camera. It's quite an upgrade from my Nikon D3200 I've been using since however long. But again, it's also a massive improvement from what I saw coming from the Lumix G7, which I'm not going to completely bash that camera just because it wasn't a great camera for me. There's a lot of people who actually use that camera and it's perfect for the work that they're doing, but just on my account, it was just not quite a camera that I could actually adapt myself to, and therefore I actually go ahead and made this investment here into the Sony a6300. So anyway guys, it's been Adam here. Thank you for watching. Take care, and of course, I'll see you guys in the next tech video. Bye for now.